Welcome back to the Pain Game YouTube channel, and before I break down the Jake Paul fight, I have to let you in on an announcement. We are going to America. The Pain Game is headed to LA on August 3rd for the Terence Crawford fight. We will be live inside the stadium, the BMO Stadium in LA, as he takes on Madrimov, challenging for the 154-pound title. I'm going to get to witness greatness as one of the greatest boxers in the world right now, if not the best pound-for-pound fighter. Terence Crawford potentially wins his 4th weight world title, and it's not just that. The entire card is stacked. You've got Andy Ruiz making his comeback after he obviously dethroned Anthony Joshua those years ago, and he's trying to get back into the title picture, but he's got to go through Big Baby Miller to do so. We'll have 600 pounds of heavyweight monsters colliding in the ring. That is a fun fight if I've ever seen it. Pitbull Cruz is fighting 140-pound title holder and a star in the making. And not to mention, one of my favorite music artists ever is performing live that night. Multiple tracks. It's not just one track and then they're done. Eminem will be live in LA while I'm on the live stream. I'm going to be freaking out. I hope you enjoy it. August 3rd, be with us live. And also, I've done a breakdown of these fights on my last video, so check that out after you've watched this one. But let's talk about Jake Paul, because when this fighting experiment of his started, I'd been quite friendly with him. I'd had him on the podcast plenty of times. Real cool guy, very smart businessman, a lot of respect for what he's achieved. And when he was going into these fights that a lot of people thought were unwinnable, like Ben Askren, like Tyron Woodley, I was all in favour of it and I was supporting him, because to me, he was the underdog, even though I actually believed he could win those fights. And the longer that's gone on, the more experience he's getting. You'd have thought that the incline and the learning curve of his competition would have gotten harder and harder and harder, because that's the only way you're going to get better. And that's just not what's happening right now. Like at the start, when he had the age on them, he had the youth on them, he didn't have the experience on them really, because they had been in MMA cages and at least they'd had fighting experience. He'd just done a couple of little charity boxing things. So the element of mystery and what's going to happen here was still very much there early on. But now, guys like Mike Perry, who are smaller than you, less experienced in a boxing ring than you are, and also older, like quite significantly older than you, I'm like, where is this going? I don't understand it, because it's like playing the same computer game level over and over again and expecting to get better at the overall game. Like, the difficulty should increase through the levels, right? That's not happening. And if you're talking about winning a world title, the difficulty should severely increase. If anything, Mike Perry's easier than some of the guys he's fought. And actually, the size difference is more significant than previous guys he's fought. Like Anderson Silva had a similar, size to him in a different body shape. Jake Paul looked like a fucking giant in there compared to Mike Perry. So with all of those things taken into account, it didn't feel like a fair fight. And at this point, when Jake's had so much boxing experience now, I don't get it. Other than banking cash, where is the reward here? Because you're not learning from it, and no one out there who really knows fighting is going to be blown away by it and be like, wow, did you see that great performance? Not really. How can you look that great against the guy who's as shit as Mike Perry? No offense, right? I know Mike Perry is tough, bare knuckle and all of that, but we can tell at boxing, he is dog shit. And people can say, oh, you're only saying that because Jake Paul beat him. No, it was the things he was doing in there. Mike Perry was doing things that were trained out of me when I started learning boxing within 3 months. Like, that's how really embarrassingly amateur he was in there. Mike Perry was stiff as fuck, chin up in the air, hands down, flat-footed, following Jake into every trap he set, not cutting the ring off. I mean, I could go on and on. Circling towards the power hand, he looked absolutely clueless. He didn't look like he knew anything. Like, I'll give Mike one thing. He's a tough dude. Don't get me wrong. You know, you've ate up to the weight. You're a natural 170 pounder. You're fighting a guy who's cut down to 200, but is really probably 220 pounds in there, and you're eating shot. You are tough, but there's also a point where toughness branches over into stupidity. How many brain cells were given up by Mike Perry, like, unnecessarily? Keep your fucking hands up. Like, there's just so many basic things that he wasn't able to do in there. It was an embarrassing performance. At least he got paid for it. BKFC, who've really built a reputation around how tough Mike Perry is and that he's the king of violence, they lost big, in my opinion, in this, because their credibility would have been impacted by that performance big time. He looked horrendous. And Jake's power is always good, but with that weight discrepancy, Mike Perry couldn't take much from Jake, really. Every time he landed, you could see the reaction he was getting. fighting, which from the guy who basically trades off of how tough he is, it was probably a very humbling experience for Mike being in there, because he wasn't even able to throw with authority. He wasn't able to judge the distance because he was too scared of what was coming back. He was throwing well out of range, and Jake was just letting him come in and bang, stick it right on him. To be fair to Jake, he used all of his IQ, all of his fundamentals to deal with a man who is fighting in such a clueless manner in the way you should. Let him keep walking forward and punish him for his stupidity. Jake did the right thing here. I'm not criticizing the performance. It was solid, but it's always hard to gauge how good a performance is when the opponent is that easy to beat. I like Jake's jab. I think the fact that he's working on that, if he ever does do the Tommy Fury rematch, he needs to be able to trade with him and actually have a similar level of arsenal to Tommy Fury, which I think he didn't have in the first one. And now he might be better prepared if that fight materializes again, which it will, because where the fuck else is Tommy Fury getting money from? Let's be real. If there's one concern I would have for Jake Paul, is that coming into the third round, him probably being about 220 on the night, he looked like he was really feeling the weight. I mean, he's never had the best gas tank in his fight. You know, he's carried his power well, and he's always found a way to get through the later rounds. But for me, he looked more tired than I've seen him that early in a fight. And when you put on that kind of size, it can have diminishing returns at some point. You know, early on, you're powerful as fuck. But if he was in there against the guy who could get right up close to him and apply the pressure and take some of that power because they're the same size as him and give more back and put the pressure on him, I would wonder how he'd be able to help, how to sustain that 220 pounds, because it's a lot to be carrying when it's not really what your natural walk-around weight should be. I think if Jake was to step up in competition, his weight would have to come down immediately, because the guys at 200 pounds are just going to be bigger than him. They're going to be able to carry the weight a lot easier than he will. Therefore, they'll be fitter than him. This cruiserweight thing, I don't agree with. I think he's a 185 pounder roughly, or whatever, you know, they're going to call it at, but it's got to be down rather than 200, in my opinion. That's if he wants to compete with guys who are actually on the level. If you just want to keep fighting these smaller guys who are UFC dudes, then he'll probably get away with it, no problem, because they're not going to be able to take his power, and the cards are just too stacked in his favor. And Mike had a little bit of success in the third, but from the fourth round on, Jake absolutely fucking dominated, and he hurt Mike consistently, set it up with a jab, really nice work, come over with those big hard shots, those overhands. And in the fifth round, I remember thinking that was really disappointing to watch. Like, I don't even think Mike Perry threw a single punch in the fifth round. And you can call yourself the king of violence all you want, but that wasn't a good look for you, mate. That was terrible. And actually, Jake did look really tired at points in that fifth round. And I thought to myself, if you were in there with a guy with a bit more in his tank, who could actually punish you for some of the positions he was in, he was really vulnerable, Jake, but there was nothing coming back whatsoever. The king of violence was the king of friendship in that moment, because he didn't want anything to do with Jake Paul at that point. And in the sixth round, Jake Paul just blasted the living shit out of him, and it was over. Yeah, it was what it was. You know, and I think at this point, I'm just sort of done with watching those now. It needs to be better. And I'm not meaning a 60-year-old Mike Tyson, am I? Like, we all know what that is. It's a freak show that's going to generate a fuckload of money, and ultimately I'm worried that, you know, an old Mike Tyson is going to get badly hurt in there. But get that done, and then from Jake Paul, it's got to be serious, man. It's got to be more than this, because look, you've made a shitload of money, so that's that then. But do you want to keep on trying to sell this sort of thing? Because I don't know how much people are going to be interested for much longer. If you're constantly having age, size, and experience over these little MMA guys, where's the intrigue? We've seen it over and over again. It's the same episode of the same TV show over and over again. It's got to be better. It's funny, because one person who does come out of this looking pretty good is Nate Diaz, who was able to take that power and was able to apply the pressure, even though Nate is like a 170 pounder as well, but he's just a freak, and he can balloon up, he can carry weight a bit better than all these other 170ers, because he is big and able to take a lot of shots. And that's kind of the game plan to beat a Jake Paul, is you've got to be able to take those shots and you've got to be able to apply the punishment. But that's never gonna happen while people are so undersized and so inexperienced in a boxing ring against them. And if you think a 60-year-old is going to be able to take shots well, I'm afraid you're wrong. As much as I love Mike Tyson, that ain't 40-year-old Mike Tyson, or even 45-year-old Mike Tyson, who I'd give a fucking great chance against. From 50 and up, there's no way your chin is going to be able to absorb that level of damage. And also, cardio goes as well when you get older, so fuck knows how bad that's going to be. But I'll watch it. You know, they've got us. How can I not watch Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul? They've got us. Everyone's going to shit on it. Everyone's going to watch it. I absolutely accept that. But after that, things need to change. And one man who's having a pop at Jake Paul, but will never get in the ring with him, is Conor McGregor. And a lot of people might not like that I'm saying that, but look, the ego of Conor McGregor, he knows what would happen if him and Jake Paul fought, and he is never going to give Jake Paul that opportunity to steal that clout, to take that from him. There's no way he does that. Even though he's contracts up with the UFC in the next 2 fights, it doesn't happen. Because he knows. He's watched Jake Paul bully men who are way bigger than him. Yeah, if they were the same size, maybe Conor would win. They're not. Conor McGregor can barely get up to 170 pounds in weight. Jake Paul's walking around at 50 pounds heavier than that. This ain't heavyweight where 50 pounds isn't as much of a discrepancy, you know, sometimes you get that. Conor McGregor's a lightweight naturally. Even the way you beat Jake Paul about getting in his face, having a great gas tank. When has Conor McGregor had a great gas tank? It's shite. And as much as McGregor might be a bit more skillful than Jake, I just think one big shot of Jake Paul, then that bloke will be thinking, what the fuck was that? If Dustin Poirier can back you up, Jake Paul can put a hole in your head. And now, a word from our sponsors. Now, I've been really busy lately, and that is where the new sponsor of the Pain Game comes in, Holy. And the reason I like Holy is because it gives you energy, but unlike a lot of these other drinks out there, it cuts out all the bullshit. No sugar, no artificial coloring, and under 20 calories per serving, which is great if you're watching your calorie intake. And not only do Holy have you covered for your energy, but also your hydration. This is your new isotonic drink of choice, perfect for sport and pretty good for a hangover. So these are the sachets. You get a lovely little shaker like this, pour in your powder like that, little bit of water, give it a quick shake and enjoy. And this works out at less than 80 pence a drink, which is way less than I've paid for all of these energy drinks in cans. There's 160 milligrams of caffeine, green tea extracts, and nootropics, which helps me get shit done. Now, these guys have really supported the Pain Game in helping me make more content for you lot. So if you enjoy energy drinks anyway, then support Holy. Check the link in the description below. And you can use Pain Game 5, all one word, Pain Game and the number 5, for £5 off your first order. And then after that, you can use just Pain Game for 10% off all future orders. So get your healthy energy and mental focus using the links in the description below. Get yourself some Holy. So McGregor said Jake Paul is the biggest piss bag I've ever seen in my life. 40-pound weight difference, just out of his head. I mean, it was officially Jake Paul and Perry did weigh the same on the scales, but I get what he means. Jake was probably at least 20 to 30 pounds heavier, in my opinion, and still shitting himself in there. Nikisa, you should take him to Vegas. All right, that you never would. The Athletic Commission, testing, real fighting. Bitch asses, you could never. Then calling out 60-year-old Mike Tyson, fresh off of an in-flight medical emergency. I swear to God, you fat can of bitch piss. He's angry, McGregor, and I get why, because this impacts BKFC. He's just invested in BKFC, and they were the biggest loser. At least Mike Perry got a whole load of cash. I don't know if they got any of it. I'm pretty sure they didn't. So BKFC have just lost their biggest star, and if it had been competitive, it wouldn't have been that way. It was a one-sided beatdown, and it was an embarrassing. And that'll be partly why McGregor's pissed. And that's probably why Conor McGregor said, hey, Mike, you're released and you can go and compete in your smelly, dirty boxing championship. Good luck, you're fired. He can't fire him. Apparently, Mike's also an investor / owner of BKFC, so that isn't the truth. But I just think Conor, with the ego he has, seeing the shine that Jake Paul has created for himself and the buzz and the hype in the movement he's created in boxing, it will bother him. He wants to be the most talked about person always, and Jake Paul, when he does put on a big fight like this, he gets buzz. I do think that buzz is diminishing slightly because of the level of fighters he's taken on, but it is there to some degree. And Conor not fighting for fuck knows how long and constantly injured and all of this bullshit with the state of him on TV interviews and whatever, it must be bothering him. He wants that limelight, desperately. But is he brave enough after his contract's up to actually get in the ring with Jake Paul and prove that he's the better man? Because you know what? If you're going to talk all this shit, even with the size discrepancies and all that, then fucking let's do it then. Because let's be real, as much as I think Conor would get his ass kicked, it would be a mega fight. Everyone would watch it. It just depends on how Conor looks in the next 2 fights before he gets out of his contract, how many people want to watch it. And I know I've already said I don't want to see Jake take those kind of fights anymore. I think for Conor McGregor, the world makes an exception. Now, in terms of who's next after Mike Tyson, Jake Paul did call out Alex Pereira, who he knows is currently under contract with the UFC. Calling out Alex Pereira after you've just beaten Mike Perry, what do you compare that to? It's like dumping the girl at McDonald's tunnels because you think you've got a shot with Margot Robbie. Like, it's completely different. Alex Pereira, genuinely a 200-pound fighter, genuinely 6'4", genuinely got good hands and actual defensive boxing capabilities, and could really hurt Jake Paul badly. I think this is a whole nother jump, and it's so far-fetched from where he is right now. It just seems like you don't really mean it. Like, you know he can't fight you. And don't get me wrong, it's a really good fight. Like, I would pick Jake Paul to beat most MMA guys, especially under a certain weight category. Alex Pereira is one that I'd go, I think you're getting your ass kicked, yeah, maybe. That's partly why the skepticism comes from the call-out, because it's like, you're fighting Mike Perry and, like, these sort of guys, and then you're trying to get a guy who's this big, this harder hitter, specialist in knockouts in the UFC, great hands, right? Like, really would give him a lot of problems compared to where he's at right now. It's like, it just doesn't add up for me. And that's where the frustration comes in from fans, because we're like, well, you're talking a big game, but the reality is you're not fighting guys anywhere near that level. And looking back at the whole Tyson Fury thing and everything I witnessed with that situation, fans want you to deliver on what you say. And if you're having those kind of fights and calling out those kind of fighters, and it never materializes and you just stay on the same course, they get resentful. They get pissed off. They're like, no, we're paying a lot of money here. You got pay-per-view money for a Mike Perry fight is stretching it as is. Come on, it's time to deliver soon. And don't get me wrong, before the fight, Mike Perry came in with a lot of buzz, and that's why your pay-per-view could be reasonably explained. But in reality, in the skill set, it's not explainable. He's a million miles away, as we know. Whereas Alex Pereira, that would be the real fucking deal for me. Even if he's not officially a boxer, that's a real fucking test. Even just moving up in the size would be a good idea. Like, Darren Till's available. He's out of his UFC contract. He's got good hands. We've seen that before in the UFC. He gave Dricus du Plessis a lot of problems, who's now the UFC middleweight champion. Darren Till is legit and actually has been boxing for the past couple of years in a boxing gym. That is a fight that would get you some respect. But it's one of them where you might struggle. People might find out things. Do you want to avoid that as well? When are we going to up the levels, mate? That's what I'm confused about. Now, there's obviously the KSI fight, which has never materialized, and it's been one of the most frustrating things for all of the fans who deserve that fight. They really do. And recently, Mams Taylor reached out to Nikisa. Mams being KSI's guy, Nikisa being Jake's guy. Mams said, look, let's put the beef behind us. Let's make this fight happen. And it was all about, well, we need it on this date or we need it in February. Mams is like, whatever you want, we'll make the fight happen. Let's just get it done this time. And Nikisa went on Ariel Helwani and said, I'm not replying to him because he's pissed me off. And the way he negotiates has pissed me off. And it's like, you know what good businessmen do, right? Like Vince McMahon, Dana White. You can't hold a grudge when it's time to make big fights happen. You've got to get them done. For me, I think he's actually hiding behind that as an excuse. I think actually Jake Paul has just so much invested in boxing that that fight is more risk than it is worth to that team. Like KSI, he's into music, he's doing his prime thing. Boxing is him being an entertainer, trying to make big fights and fun fights, but it isn't everything. Jake Paul's everything is boxing, and he's made that loud and clear. Now, if you're trying to set up for a world title fight, which I don't know how that's going to happen, but especially a Canelo fight, which possibly could happen as an exhibition or whatever, it would generate so much money. You're risking not only your opportunities now, but later. If you get in the ring with a KSI and either have an off night, or you know he's better than you thought, or you win but you don't win well, or you lose even worse. I mean, KSI showed against Tommy Fury. The level between him and Jake Paul is not what people thought it was. It's very close. And that fight alone would have been enough to make them go, not sure this is worth it, actually. That's my real opinion. I don't think Jake's like scared of fighting JJ. I think that business-wise, they've just got so much riding on this compared to JJ that it isn't worth it for them anymore. And in a sense, yeah, Jake Paul's side, by not replying, you're actively backing out. There's no point in saying it any other way, because that's the fucking truth. And I think when Nikisa answers these questions of like, well, it's not that it won't happen, it's more a case of if and when, and I'm just like, bollocks, mate, absolute bollocks. I'm sorry, like, I like these guys, right? I'm not angry at them or anything like that. It's just like, when you talk like that, you see right through it. Do you know what I mean? It's easy to read. And while I'm on the subject, I actually think KSI's team could learn a lot from Jake Paul's team, because as much as I'm frustrated with some of the matchmaking, they have done a great job in building the star of Jake Paul, the reputation of Jake Paul, and matchmaking and picking the perfect opponents at the perfect time. They've done a great job. I just think it's gone on a little too long like that. And I know that KSI's coaches are the ones who basically decide who the opponent is going to be. A lot of people think it's Mams Taylor, but Mams is the one who kind of gets a load of options and then they make the final decision. And I just think that they're holding him back to a point where it's hurting his star. It's actually making it worse, you know, not better. Like, other than Tommy Fury, KSI's star quality of the opponents he's faced have paled in comparison to what Jake Paul has been able to do. And I think KSI, if his coaches had more faith in him and more confidence, they could have taken out a lot of these names as well and built KSI's star up just as much in the way of the boxing world as Jake Paul's has been. And it's been an opportunity missed on their part. And then you look at JJ fighting fighters like Slim and Anthony Taylor, and you think he's clearly not that excited about it. You could have easily gotten bigger names and put him in with bigger tests many times in the past as well. So not only is it hurting KSI's motivation, but I just think it's hurting the excitement around his fights as well. And that would be one thing I'd love to see from KSI's coaches, is just pick bigger name fighters. But he's very capable. We've seen that in the Tommy Fury fight. He can do this. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the last video I did about the trip to LA. Can't wait to see what you think about that as well. Hit the like button, subscribe to the Pain Game YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.